I've got the great pleasure now to speak to Dr. David Dempsey. And it's very nice to have a fellow Irishman here with me.
Yeah, nice to see you over here, Lisa.
Welcome to Luxembourg. I know. Now, of course, he's already been introduced as the Ireland country leader, but in fact, he was also one of the original founders of Salesforce in Europe. And before we get on to perhaps the topic of sustainability, I would like you to tell us, how did Salesforce Europe begin? Because from a little conversation we had over there over a cup of tea, you said you sent off that original email.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When we met this morning, I was telling Lisa that Salesforce is 23 years old as a company, so it started in 1999. And back then, shortly after it started, I was in Ireland with two colleagues and saw a little piece in Business Week magazine. On an inside page, page 29 of Business Week, a single paragraph. This company in San Francisco was starting, and they were going to make enterprise software as easy to consume as buying a book on Amazon. So I had a good guffaw at that and said, that's never going to happen. But I was interested enough, and I sent Mark Benioff an email and said, hey, sounds like a great idea, let's talk about it. And then after 5 or 6 months of dancing around together, we eventually set up Salesforce in Europe. So the headquarters of Salesforce in Europe is actually in Dublin for that reason, not because of any tax reasons or anything like that, but because of the email that we sent to Mark Benioff.
But because of you, in fact.
Well, whatever. The other two retired, and I'm the one who still keeps coming to work. So this is almost like a family business to me, Lisa. This is, I mean, it's not Salesforce as 75,000 people, 80,000 people, but for me it's personal because, you know, when you're there from the very start, this is a family business to me, and that's why the values are like personal values and family values.
Well, we'll come back to values, but the fact that I wanted you to tell that story because we'll come on to something called ecopreneurs. There's lots of entrepreneurs here, and you effectively started Salesforce Europe as that mindset. You were coming with that kind of entrepreneurial mindset to spread across Europe. And so with that in mind, let's just move on to what you are today, which is you have put sustainability as one of those top values, not recently, but from the beginning.
Yeah, because it's interesting. When we started first, you know, we were a disruptor in the marketplace. Traditional software industry that I had worked in before that, it tended to be a big ticket license sale where you'd sell some software, you'd ship a CD, and you didn't care whether it was ever implemented or not or ever used. You just cashed the check and then you went to the next piece of business. But in our case, we disrupted the business model because our business model was different. We were saying to customers, we will supply you with enterprise level software as powerful as anybody else and as good as any other out there. But we'll offer it to you on a subscription basis, so you can try it every month and you can pay for it every month. And if you use it every month, we'll take that into revenue. So that meant that right from the very get-go, we were completely connected with our customers, and you know, one of our original values was customer success. Because if our customers weren't successful, we weren't successful, we couldn't take the revenue in. It was also, we had a value of trust back then because we were saying to the industry, trust us, this is a new business model, but trust us that we will look after your most precious thing, your data, and that we'll stay in business. It was also, we had a value of innovation because the business we were in was completely innovative. The business model, our technology was innovative. And then equality. So there were our 4 values from the very start: trust, innovation, equality, and customer success. And then if you look at those 4 values, the value of equality in particular, we were the democratization as we saw it of the industry, but we were equalizing the playing pitch for everybody that we touched. And over time, you know, back over the first decade of our existence, that value of equality was all around making sure that everybody had a chance to play in the same space that we were in. But then that morphed into sustainability because equality and sustainability really are variations on the same theme. So in 2011, we produced our first stakeholder report. And, you know, from that time on, we've been on a sustainability journey, if you like, where we believe the planet is a stakeholder of our business. You know, we're a very successful business, thankfully, but, you know, everybody we touch has the right to ask us, are we doing good for the communities and our customers and everybody we operate with? So sustainability has been part of our journey since 2011.
Which is already such a long time compared to many companies which now have it, you know, in the documents and their mission pillars, etc. But you've been doing it for 11 years or so, and you've reached net zero.
Yeah, I'm delighted to say that we are a net zero business since 2021, since last year. And we also offer renewables across all of our operations. So, it's a journey that most businesses like ours are on. We're a little bit privileged in that we were able to get there so early. But if you look at our business, there are 4 parts of our business. One is our operations side. The other is the business travel side of our business. Then there's our employee commute. And then there's the suppliers that we touch. So they were the 4 areas we had to concentrate on specifically to get to net zero, to see exactly what the carbon footprint was of those. And it was interesting because we're no different to any other business that's here today. For us to become net zero or to think about becoming net zero, the first thing you have to do is quantify exactly what your carbon footprint is. And we were the same as everybody else. We start searching in filing cabinets for electricity bills. We start seeing who our suppliers were, what our buildings were made up of, what the outputs of our buildings were. And that was heavy lifting. We collected all that. It took us forever to do it. And we needed to get it into our sustainability report. And it actually took us longer to prepare our carbon data than our financial data. It took us 6 months to do that every time we came around to it because of spreadsheets and whatever. So this was just such a heavy lift every year that we said, we have our own product set is the best platform that's out there. Why are we using spreadsheets to track our carbon? So we dropped it onto the Salesforce platform. And that then became the product that's now Net Zero Cloud. So it's what we use for our own carbon accounting and what we offer to our customers. And the great thing is that the data that comes from it is financial audit level data. And this is the real test of it, that it's not. There's so much nervousness about carbon data that this is signed off. Our auditors happen to be EY, so they signed off the data, and that's where it still comes from.
Well, when it comes to regulations and the law is still moving. It's still moving when it comes to the financial market, and ESG is something that pretty much every company has to think about now on a financial spreadsheet, along with just company-wide values. So what would your advice be for anyone sitting here, anyone outside who's still enjoying their lunch and not in this room? What would your advice be to them to move towards net zero, and what are the benefits of that?
I think the regulation thing is a big part of it, because we can ignore this or we can embrace it, but regulation is coming as quick as it can. And the reality is that all of our businesses are going to be regulated around our carbon footprint, very formally, very shortly. So that regulation is coming. So I think you need to start to prep for that. But I think that unless you know what your own carbon footprint is, what gets measured gets done. It's simple. It's the same with carbon. So you have to understand where your own emissions are coming from. And the easy part of it, if you like, is scope 1 and 2. That's the stuff that you have yourself, your own buildings, your own energy that you use. And then the tricky part for us all is scope 3. And scope 3 is everything that's in your supply chain. And you really need to start thinking about this now and start to look at where exactly your carbon's coming from, and then how you can mitigate that carbon, how you can reduce it, go for the quick wins early, and then work on the harder stuff later. But I think that, identifying it, knowing where it is, I think that's the challenge for us all at the start.
And in that scope 3, as you call it, that's where the gaps can form, because that's the harder data to access. So how have you managed that?
Well, if you look at, if you look at scope 3, we all have it. And the interesting thing about climate challenge is that this is a single challenge. So there's no point in me being perfect, you being perfect, or everybody else being perfect. There's only one world, one climate crisis. So we all need to work on this together. So every one of us have suppliers. And the biggest part, if you look at our supply chain, about 80% of our emissions come from our supply chain. So the products that we make ourselves are fine, but then it's everybody who supplies the services to us. Now, it's probably easy for those of us in successful businesses, because we're a little bit privileged, to mandate to our suppliers that you will, adopt science-based targets and go on a 1.5 degree trajectory the same as the rest of us. But we can't, if you mandate, it won't work. You have to do this as a partnership, because a lot of your suppliers may well be struggling to make payroll versus make carbon accounting. So you have to work with them to solve the carbon problem. That's a global problem. We solve it together in partnership rather than in a mandate. And one of the things that we did, and again, it's open to anybody else who'd like to use it, we have a sustainability exhibit which we drop into all of our procurement contracts. And it's pretty simple. It's legalese, so it's not that simple, but it is reasonably easy to understand legal language that we put into our procurement contracts. And we ask our suppliers to sign up to that, and we make this available to anybody who wants to use it. We believe that standards and open source and making stuff available to everybody to use, I think, is a way that will help us all as well.
Well, you mentioned a couple of words there that have cropped up a few times, cooperation and open source, which we will come back to this afternoon with the Change the Face campaign to put out there the open source best use practices. And on that front, also earlier today, we were talking about something that you were one of the first to sign up to, which is you were one of the founders, in fact, of the Pledge 1%.
Yeah, and if you go back to there's an organization now that many of you will know, it's called Pledge 1%, but it came from, when Salesforce started first, there were 40 when I joined, 40 worldwide. When it started first, it had this mission to, we were a disruptor and felt like a disruptor. We were quite agile, small, and had big plans for changing things. But one of the things that we set out to do at the very get-go was we set aside 1% of our product, 1% of our employee time, and 1% of our equity to not-for-profits. And when you look at that, back then, 1% of our equity was the easiest thing in the world to do because there was no equity. So it was 1% of nothing. Now, I don't know what the market cap of Salesforce is today, but it's $100 billion plus. So 1% of that equity is significant. But then 1% of the employee time was the really fantastic thing, because you had people like me or whatever who were enthusiastic about Salesforce, who knew our products inside out, and we were mandated. I have 7 days a year. Every employee, there's 75,000 employees, have 7 days a year to work with whomever they want on a not-for-profit basis. And the early stages, it was fine. I worked with Habitat for Humanity, painting a house or doing a little bit of tiling, all the things I wouldn't do in my own home, but I was doing those and my 1% stuff. But then as it got different and as we got bigger, it meant that the people who had implemented Salesforce for Vodafone, for example, our big customer Vodafone, the people who implemented Salesforce for Vodafone were now available to implement the same Salesforce product, which we were providing free, to Camara, which is an Irish charity which takes refurbished computers and sends them out to Africa. So that was really empowering, that 1%. And then 1% of the product, now over 55,000 customers use the Salesforce product on a not-for-profit basis. But the reason I'm saying that, Lisa, is that in the early stages, the focus was on equality, because diversity and inclusion was, bringing people into our space. But now that's morphed into sustainability. But now that's morphed into the ESG. We've moved to the E part of ESG as being the sort of critical crisis at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And then I just want to move from that to the idea of ecopreneurs, which is something that you care about as well. And the fact that, to use that word, cooperation, you want to try to empower these young, and agile, you also used that word. You were agile once. Perhaps it's harder to be agile.
Yes, exactly. As you got 66, you're not quite as agile.
I didn't mean age. I meant size of the company.
Yes,
I mean, how can you kind of help with the company that you have, the ecopreneurs that are coming up now, and the ones that are, with those new dynamic ideas that are needed to help sustainability in the world?
Well, if you look, I have to be careful here, I'm not a scientist, but just some of the headline numbers, that the reality is this is 2022. 2050 is 28 years out from now. We're a 23-year-old company. Vodafone, a 40-year-old company. So in the life of our companies, that's the window we have left to 2050 to stop this tipping point. And, in that tipping point, in that 28 years, we've got to reduce the carbon output of the planet to keep us on or close to this 1.5 degree trajectory that we're on. Otherwise, there's no coming back. We just move past a place where we get back from. Now, we can do it by reducing the carbon from the businesses that we have, but there's a need for technology, there's a need for new thinking to really drive that and to really give solutions at scale. And there's a lot of very fine technology, a lot of very fine thinking out there, a lot of thinking that's so different from how I might think. And they're the ecopreneurs. They're the ones in the climate tech space. They're the ones who are going to bring technology to solve the issues that we have. But the problem for them is, and it's interesting, I was at COP26, and at COP, the one thing that came out of COP, the one reassurance I got out of it, was that there is a lot of money available for ecopreneurs, for climate tech. In fact, the place, I would say, is awash with money for those spaces. But the challenge is the ecopreneurs who are driving the technology, who are driving the change, who'll keep us under that 1.5 degrees, they don't know how to scale businesses. And what they want from us, we have an impact fund. Most of the big companies here will have impact funds or will take investments, ethical investments like that. But the businesses, the ecopreneurs, the ones who are going to drive it, they know how to create lab-based meat. They know how to, how to drive the technologies for the planet, but they don't know how to scale businesses. So I think the big ask and the big encouragement that I'd give to people here are just bring your expertise to these, but just find them. They're not precious. They're so passionate about their ideas. They're so passionate about the changes they're going to bring, but they can't scale businesses or struggle to scale businesses. So you might say that my skills, what can I help? I'm an accountant, I'm a technologist, I'm a lawyer. How can I help? You can help those businesses. You can help them more than the money. So ecopreneurs are the future. The window is very, very short. The window is less than the lifetime of our businesses, and we need to help them to scale now, because scale is the challenge.
When you keep talking about the carbon emissions and monitoring the carbon output, of course, well, we're actually talking about carbon dioxide. I keep thinking about methane now as well, because methane is even worse as a greenhouse gas. And I'm sure many of you have heard the news recently that in New Zealand, there's now a tax on the output from animals, on the methane from both ends of a cow, for instance.
Yeah.
We haven't introduced that in Europe yet, but methane is another one to consider.
So I live on a farm, so I'm
thinking
very familiar
of it because
with
you have a farm. That's
yeah. But I think that the challenge is that again, it doesn't make any difference where the gas is coming from. And the encouraging thing about COP26 was that there was a big focus on methane and the reduction of the methane outputs. But methane is, again, not a scientist, but is 8 times, I think, more damaging than carbon dioxide. So you solve the big things first, and that gives us at least enough of a runway. We have a carbon window or envelope, and again, numbers may not be correct. It's about 570 gigatons, and once we use that up, we get into the tipping point. There's no coming back from that. And right now, every year, the world consumes about 50 gigatons of that. So that's not even 28 years. If we keep going as we are now, we probably have only 10, 12 years before we reach that tipping point. So we just have to take drastic action now, and we don't need to be too precious about it. Just get in and do it, I think, would be my strong encouragement.
But going back to carbon, I know that you have launched a carbon marketplace vouched for by third parties. So would you like to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting, and sometimes people will have thoughts on this. Salesforce on the 25th of October, which is just Monday, I think, launched the voluntary carbon marketplace, and it's actually powered by the Salesforce platform. It runs on Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which is one of the products. But what it is, it's a place for ecopreneurs to offer their solutions, because again, they're in the space, they're disconnected from business at scale, and they have a product, maybe a nature-based solution, which will help to reduce the carbon outputs, but they've no way of trading that. So what this does, it allows the ecopreneurs to make their offerings and put them up on the platform, and to just offer them for sale at a price. And we don't buy it. It's not for Salesforce to buy it necessarily, but it's for anybody who wants to buy carbon credits to go in there. Now, the challenge with carbon credits is they rarely aren't vouched for. So the difference, there's a lot of skepticism around the quality of carbon credits. What's a good quality one versus what's a rubbish one? So the ones that are up on the platform are verified or are examined on the way in by Calix and by Silvera, two separate companies, and they'll give a rating to it. And then the carbon is up there. It has a price per ton. I was looking at one this morning, $5 a ton, or up to $18, $20, $25 a ton. And if you want to buy that carbon offset, you can do it. Now, why would you buy it? You'd buy it because while you're reducing your own carbon, you're never going to eliminate carbon, so you'll use that offset for that. But the real value of the offset is that it empowers the ecopreneur, because the funds go back to them to invest in their project and then to drive it at scale. So that's the real value of it, and that's why we offer that marketplace. It's not, we don't sell the carbon credits, but we just offer the platform as a marketplace for it. So it's up and running, I think, since Monday.
That's a wonderful resource for everybody here present. Now, just as a final thought, you're clearly invested in the thought of sustainability and how to make the world a better place. You have that as a legacy mission, I'm sure, not just with everything you've brought from Salesforce across Europe, but you've possibly reached retirement age. It doesn't look like you're retiring for any time soon. However, as a legacy over the next number of years, I won't count how many, but by 2050, what can we do to make it happen?
I think that you're right about the retirement thing, because I'm supposed to be semi-retired, but I'm probably busier than ever. But it's hard sometimes when you're connected to a business personally to give it up. But I think that if you look at me as a 66-year-old, I mean, 28 years' time, who knows? But I'm a future ancestor. We're all future ancestors of this planet. We're handing this over to a future that we don't know about. And really, whatever we do now is, it's going to dictate the state of the planet that we leave. And unless we get at this and get at it at scale now, it's just going to be too late. So, I mean, I think what I would say to you now is that now is the time for action. The reality is that governments will eventually do the heavy lifting here. There's a lot of heavy lifting. There are micro solutions and macro solutions. And the macro solutions are the big heavy lifting, the big infrastructure for electric cars, for decarbonized grids, all those things. They're all government heavy lifting, but governments move too slow because there's always an election coming up next year, or that still be another government can handle that. But businesses are agile. Businesses move quicker. We can make our own decisions quicker. So we really have to step into this space right now. So the big ask of you will be to drive your business to step into the space now until the heavy lifting is ready to be done in a decade's time or whatever it is. So now is the time. We're out of time. We're out of time here. We're out of time on the planet. So it's unless we do it now.
Well, yeah, we have the red lights flashing at us. David, thank you so much, and that really is a massive call to action, not a small undertaking for sure, but you've done wonderful work with Salesforce Europe, so congratulations to you. Thank you for all of the open source information that you give to everybody here present, and thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.